Rabbis. We're sitting here with the leader of the International Israelite Board of Rabbis, Chief Rabbi Shemuel Funnye. How are you today?
Thank God I'm blessed. Shalom, shalom.
I've been waiting for this interview for quite a while because, I do interviews with a lot of the elders in the community, and I just want to cover all the communities, from every congregation, from every faith, because I think it's important for our youth and the people that are part of the community to see us come together and to see just the unity between us, between brothers and sisters, and to hear the perspective from different points of view, because sometimes we're just stuck in New York, but we don't get to see the broader spectrum. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and just answer them as you feel.
Absolutely.
How did you start out? Where were you born? Who are your parents? And how did you get? Where did you grow up at? This is usually what I do with my interviews.
All right. Thank you. Well, my name is Rabbi Shemuel Funnye. I was born in Georgetown, South Carolina, South Carolinian. I was raised in Chicago, Illinois for the early part of my life. But when I was going into my sophomore year in high school, I returned to South Carolina to finish high school. And subsequently, I have then been raised both in the city of Chicago as well as in a small town in Georgetown, South Carolina. My parents were not a part of the Israelite community. My parents were in the AME Church, African Methodist Episcopal Church.
Big church.
As a matter of fact, I was offered a scholarship to Allen University to become a minister in the AME Church. However, there were issues that I had, mainly the divinity of Jesus, God being dead, or part of God being dead for 3 days and 3 nights. I wanted to know who was in charge. And one of the other issues that really made me very uncomfortable was understanding. I was a student of history, I was a student of geography, and understanding the geography and understanding somewhat of the history of that part of the world. I couldn't comprehend why every church I'd ever been in, nobody on the wall ever looked like me. And that struck me.
Right.
So if the person that we were saying represented the Son of God didn't look like me, that was the same person that told me when I first went back to South Carolina, and I went into the doctor's office, and a woman hollered out, "Ian's are supposed to go in the other door." And when I went to the show, the woman said, "Where are you going? Y'all supposed to be in the balcony." Now, we paid the same money.
Wow.
So how then could I, in good consciousness, go to church and be offering prayers to someone that was going to be an intercessor for me with God, who looked just like the person who told me that I couldn't sit on the main floor in the movie theater, or that the door I went into to see the doctor did not have colored on it. Right. So I had to go out of that door, go into a colored door that said colored, to see the same doctor. So for me, that was problematic. I'm a product of the 60s. Right. I was born in 1952. I'm celebrated with the blessings of Hashem my 65th birthday this year. And pray that the Eternal will keep me and bless me more. So the ideas that brought me on my spiritual journey to Israel were, one, this idea of saviors can't look like you. Saviors look like other people. And I didn't think that was good for black people. Mm-hmm. I didn't think that was the best methodology for black people, the best route for them to go. Just didn't work for me.
That's great. That's amazing, because you this is why I like to do these type of interviews, because you get to see the foundation.
Yes.
You get to see what sparked the person
Yes.
to come to a certain point. And certainly being in a segregated South, and then coming from Chicago and then going back to the South, I mean, those things, those dynamics were like, you're going through a door. Probably in Chicago, you were able to go through that door, but in South Carolina, they're telling you go to the colored side. So it's amazing. But so the 60s, you set the foundation. At about what time, who was it that sparked your interest, or what was it that sparked your interest to come to this walk of life?
That's an excellent question. In 1970, I was working at a large accounting firm in Chicago, and there was a young black man who had what I called a beanie on his head. And I said, "Why do you have that beanie on your head?" And he said, "This isn't a beanie, it's a kippah, and I'm wearing this kippah because I am a Hebrew." And he said, "You probably don't know it, but you are a Hebrew too." I said, "Well, what do you mean a Hebrew?" And so we had a discussion, and he said, "I go to a congregation, and the congregation was located on the south side of Chicago. My first encounter with the Israelite community was through a Messianic congregation.
Okay.
And the leader of the congregation was Rabbi Robert Devine, and I studied with him for several years. But the more I studied, I said to him one day, I said, "Rabbi, teaching how we're teaching and trying to incorporate, I don't care that we're making Jesus black."
Right.
I said, "The problem is it's like putting a left-handed glove on your right hand. You can turn it upside, you can get it on,
Right.
but it doesn't feel right."
Right.
And I said, "So this isn't feeling right with me anymore. I can't continue to wrap myself into having to come and die, and well, bro, if you don't believe that," I said, "Well, I don't," and I've gotten to that place, so I moved on. And as I moved on, I began studying with Rabbi Abihu Reuben. Rabbi Reuben was the spiritual leader of Ethiopian Hebrew congregation in Chicago. And as I studied with Rabbi Reuben, Rabbi Reuben was teaching Hebrew. Rabbi Reuben was teaching Tanakh. Rabbi Reuben was teaching prophecy. Rabbi Reuben was teaching the importance of education and acquiring a good education. But one of the things that we did not have a Sefer Torah. We didn't have a Sefer Torah scroll. And on my first visit to New York, 1979, 1980, thereabouts, I was with the Rabbi Devine still, and we came to New York, and we went into Bet Shalom. At the time, it was Ethiopian Hebrew congregation, 730 Willoughby Avenue.
Okay.
Because all of the congregations that was founded by students of Chief Rabbi W.A. Matthew had Ethiopia in their names. And most of the congregations today that call themselves Hebrew congregations, they took Ethiopia out because I guess they lost the connection of why we were Ethiopian Hebrews. But we never dropped our Ethiopian name. We never dropped it because Ethiopia does not mean that we are Ethiopian people. Ethiopia is the only country in sub-Saharan Africa that was never subjugated to colonialism by European powers. And so Ethiopia does not mean being Ethiopian. Ethiopianism is an ideal. It means an unconquered spirit. And this spirit has never been conquered. And so you might you may have held it down, but you never conquered it.
Right.
And so being Ethiopian Hebrews, it is that unconquered spirit. And that's the idea that I teach to our community as to why we will never drop Ethiopia out of our name. It is that place that today was the birthplace of the oldest community of Israelites in the world to this very day. Many of them are in the state of Israel today, but there are still Ethiopian Israelites in Africa, in Ethiopia, and we want to connect and reach out to them as well. So When I came to New York and went to Beth Shalom for that Shabbat service, and the men had a Torah service, and it was something that captivated me. Sunday morning, we went back and they were davening, and they were laying tefillin. That fascinated me, and I wanted to learn more. And I guess Chief Rabbi Levi Ben Levi saw the enthusiasm in my eyes, and he said, well, you know, we need more young men to study for the rabbinate and to serve our community. He said, don't answer me now. I'm going to give you my number. He said, are you married? I said, yes. He said, discuss this with your wife. And if you're interested, give me a call. Can I get your number? And I gave him my number. And we started communicating. And my wife said, if that's what you want to do, then do it. And so, therefore, I enrolled in the academy, the Israelite Academy, in 1980, and subsequently was ordained in 1985. And subsequently, while studying with Rabbi Levi, I lived in Chicago. He was here, so we used to do it. We didn't have internet. We had what you guys would call today snail's mail. So it was snail mail. So, right. You know, you had to do it. Yeah. It was so many of the things we were doing were correspondence. And I said to Rabbi, it's kind of hard to do Hebrew through correspondence. So, and Rabbi Reuben was older, so he really wasn't really up to teaching the Hebrew. So I told Rabbi I had an opportunity to go to a Jewish college in Chicago, first to study Hebrew, and then I became interested in studying other elements, Torah, Talmud, literature, philosophy. And he said, get all of the education you can get. And so I enrolled in the institution, first as a part-time student, but then I became very interested in the coursework. So I wound up enrolling as a full-time student and graduating with my undergraduate degree in Jewish studies, and then a couple of years later graduating with a master's degree from Spertus Institute of Judaica in Chicago, Illinois. So the rabbi encouraged that. And I think that my experience at Spertus gave me a much more intricate understanding of the Ashkenazi community, because I worked mainly with Ashkenazi teachers, but also I was offered a job at this institution. I was the business manager for the college. I got the job 1 year before I graduated. A new president came in, and he said, we need somebody to do business administration, handle the business of keeping the day-to-day elements of the college going. And one of my professors said, I think we have the perfect candidate in one of my students. And he told me after class one day, I want you to come with me to meet the president. I sat with him, we interviewed, and he said, I think you would be perfect for the job. Just bring me a resume back tomorrow, and can you start Monday? And so I went to work for Spertus.
About what year was this?
1984. So I worked for Spertus College from 1984, and I left Spertus in 1991. So not only did I get my master's degree, but also because I was an employee there, my wife could get another free education, so she earned a master's degree as well, okay, from the institution. I had started looking at I took a couple of courses in doing a doctorate in Jewish education, but as I began working again in another capacity, that really just became untenable for me to continue those studies. But when I left that institution in 1991, I was then hired by another Jewish nonprofit as my title was Director of Administration. And so, and then I was over, again, supervising several people. And so I worked in that institution from 1991 until I left at the end of 1994. And so for those several years, about 10 years, I was intimately involved in the Ashkenazi community. And so during that time, I met rabbis from every stripe, from Orthodox to Conservative or Reform, I learned the stark differences in many of their understandings and how they see each other. But I also learned that even though they have these theological differences, the ideal of their peoplehood is uppermost then in importance and today in importance. And it's that ideal of peoplehood as Israelites, that we have to be a people, one people. So I have no problem how there may be a difference in the mode of worship, as long as we're worshiping the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, the one who set forth, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. We came out of Egypt to be God's people. And so therefore, that's who we serve. Mm-hmm. And so with that in mind, being with Israelites of that consciousness, the other parts of what they do, I can live with that. Because what is the foundation of your system of faith? When you say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, then we are one.